We're now live on YouTube with the 2019 January 7th meeting of the Joint Foundation Bootstrap meeting with members from both the node.js and JS Foundation meeting together. Talk about the merger of our foundations and exactly how we are going to set that all up. We have a total of 12 people dialed in, plus 2 people from my line, so I believe we have about 14 participants today, ranging from board members from the JSF, board members from the Node Foundation, as well as active participants from both projects. And we have a full agenda today, so we're going to jump right into it. First thing that we have on the agenda today is a 5-minute time box for an update on the current status of the CPC charter. This was Michael Dawson's proposal. So Michael, would you be able to take it from here?
Sure. So the last discussion we had was around whether we could, frame the composition of the CPC as something that was inclusive, where it was easy. There was a low bar to get in and participate, but then we had a different set of sort of elected voting members that would make decisions like which projects would get in, would be admitted into the foundation and so forth. So I did do a pass updating the language to reflect that. And I've had some comments from Matteo and Joe. I think it's ready to land based on, I've addressed the comments that we've had so far. I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to look at it, but that's probably the next step, is for a few more people to review it. And if people think it looks good and reflects what we talked about, could go ahead and land at the current stage that it's at.
Okay, and just to clarify, it's already landed as stage 0, so this is what's necessary to land it as stage 1?
No, this is a PR to change. So it was already landed as stage 1, I believe. I'd have to check for sure. But then this is a PR to change the language around, the makeup of the CPC. It also did merge in, it tweaked the responsibilities in terms of reflecting the other discussion we had about just having a CPC as opposed to having a CPC and community council. So it expands the scope of those responsibilities as well. But it's a PR basically to what already landed to address those two things.
Okay, excellent. With that being said, I guess, would you say the best course of action is for us to work on it and try to land it next week, or do you think that we should land it before the next meeting?
I guess it's really, if people are going to go and look at it, then we should wait for that to happen. If not, then it's, it's ready to go. So I would be good to get more people commenting in there.
Okay. I think because it was just the holidays, let's give it one more week. Yep. And then next Monday, let's just land it as long as there's no objections at the beginning of the meeting. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, great. Next action item we have on here is the project progression proposal, and I believe that is Jory's. Jory's with us today. Jory, are you able to lead the discussion on that?
I'm so sorry. Yes, I can. It will be a bit short and sweet because unfortunately I have been pretty much out of pocket the last 2 weeks, and I don't have much to update everyone with beyond what we have so far. There's still quite a bit of work that needs to happen before we can, I think, progress this any further than stage 1. There's still some outstanding conversations around what we expect of governance in these projects and that sort of thing. And those are that conversation really needs to happen, I think, before we make too much more progress on this.
And Joy, for those who aren't aware, can you just give a quick update as to what the proposal itself is for?
Yes. So this proposal describes how a project might categorize when it comes into the foundation. If it's, say, a top-level project versus maybe a Commons.js project. These are different ways of looking at the kinds of benefits and services that a project might need within the organization, and what we require in terms of, say, I don't want to use the word maturity, but maybe maturity is the right word, before that project graduates, say, to a different level. And again, maturity I don't think is the right word. Plenty of mature projects that are quite long running, but haven't, say, grown to the size and scale of Node, that won't be a top level project, or maybe they will be a top level project, but we have to figure out what those requirements are. And there's a bit of conversation right now about whether we require something like an open governance structure in order to be a top level project, and how do we define that, and that kind of thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jory. Does anyone have any questions, or is it time to move on?
It's Miles, if I might ask a question. So Jory, is there a conversation that's happening separately, or is it just on the pull request here?
Right now it's just on the pull request, but I would love to get a group together to have, kind of like we did with the CPC, just a focused discussion on Node, who might be interested in attending. I really think this needs some, synchronous time, which we were definitely not going to get over the holiday break.
Jory, this is Brian.
Jory, go for it, Brian.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just going to ask if I could help maybe assemble this group so that we can move this conversation forward sooner rather than later. Would you like me to give you a hand with this?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, great. I'll link up with you after the call.
Cool.
I'd also be happy to help. Please, include me in that. I can help spend some cycles on this and, represent Node in that as well.
That was Tierney.
You got it.
Thank you, Tierney. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. So on to, anything else to add on that one, or are we good to go?
Good to go.
Okay, great. So the next one that we have on the agenda is the expectations proposal, which was being run by Tracy, who I don't believe was able to make it today. I can take on just kind of clarifying a few things. The expectations proposal outlines the expectations of the foundation, what the requirements for the bylaws are, what the expectations are from communications, like also the expectations of the board and the executive director, some drafts around mission statement and vision, as well as identified values of the foundation itself. It's possible that this proposal could be broken up into some other bits, but I do think it's a good, first place to start when we're talking and thinking about, what's the direction of the foundation, and having a shared contract around, those things that were mentioned there. I think similarly to kind of the other proposals, we've all been out for vacation, so we haven't dug in too much. But I do think that this is a good one to be moving forward. Does anyone have any thoughts on the current context or anything to add to the current state of that proposal? I will take that silence that everyone is absolutely thrilled about where we are with it. What I think we should be doing most likely is opening a PR to just move that thing to stage 2, exactly with the text as it is right now, and we can bike it a little bit.
I guess
sorry,
I should have added in. I still don't think we've addressed any expectations around board seats for the Node.js project.
Okay, so that is excellent point. So I think we can make a note. I think that's one of the big things that we should address today as we get into stuff, is what the board seat allocation looks like, because that is going to be one of the large blocking bits to actually getting bylaws together for the foundation. So when we get later in the agenda, we have a big chunk of time to focus on this. Let's make that one of the big things that we spend our time on today, and then we can reflect that in the text. Anything else to add to this one, or are we moving forward for now? So one thing that we didn't have on the agenda, but we have Daniel Ehrenberg joining us today, was some proposals that he opened around collaboration between standards organizations. Daniel, sorry to put you on the spot, would you be open to introducing those to individuals and just kind of explaining what they're about?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thanks for inviting me to this meeting. So there are two different efforts that I thought would be great to involve the joint. I mean, it would be great for the Joint Foundation to lead these efforts. And I mean, I know it's a bit early in planning the organizational structure, but I'm just really excited about what this new organization would do. So the first idea is to have outreach calls to help standards organizations get in touch with developers who will use their things. And this is something that specification authors, it's just a lot of work, and specification authors don't always have the perspective of the different stakeholders. And so I think the Joint Foundation could be a great place to connect resources there. So I'm just doing this sort of on my own now with TC39. I'm a member of the TC39 committee that defines the JavaScript standard. So I've been organizing these calls to various segments of the JavaScript community. And just later today, we're going to have the first one for node.js. But I'm also really interested in the JavaScript library and infrastructure community, which the JS Foundation has been really involved in. So it would be great to have help sort of running these calls, and also the institutional affiliation will be important for things like if we want to allow participants in these meetings to occasionally attend actual standards meetings sometimes. And just to make this like a more neutral body, I sort of have a conflict of interest in leading this because I'm also working on a bunch of the proposals in TC39. And so it would be great to have more people involved so that I don't like unconsciously bias the process. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I can add, Dan, and I'll put my bias out there too, that I've been attending TC39 for about 2 years now, representing Google and Node.js's interests. But one thing that I've been particularly, and I'm also on the ECMA executive committee, so that's a conflict as well. But one of the things I've been really interested in exploring is what kind of partnerships we can do between our new foundation and ECMA itself. One of the things as a committee member that I definitely know has introduced friction is not having really, really clear pathways for community members to get involved, to have discussion, to do outreach. And I think that, our foundation, especially as it represents a lot of projects that represent constituents who may not have access to the committee otherwise, that we could be introducing programs that could help people. Another thing that I think could be really great is, we've had a program within the Node.js Foundation called the Travel Fund, which helps to fund individuals to travel to events for collaboration. We've actually funded a number of people, including a high school student, to attend TC39 as invited experts. Do you think that TC39 and ECMA would be interested in, maybe creating some sort of program that could clarify how someone could become an invited expert, or some sort of, process for, transparent community involvement?
Yeah, I think that would be a natural next step to the kinds of things that, like for background, over the past year, I was a vice chair of the committee, and I was trying to focus on making sure that we had, I was trying to focus on this outreach stuff, but the first thing was to make sure that we had the policy things in place. So we managed to clarify the invited expert policy, which I guess there's currently no public written invited expert policy, but there's a sort of private one that at least is written down now that says that people in relevant open source projects can come to the committee as invited experts, potentially in a way that's figured out in cooperation with the committee. So I think that's a step that we can build on. We have an issue in TC39, maybe you have something similar in Node or other JS Foundation projects, of sort of a lot of noise in the community feedback that becomes kind of tiring and difficult to work with. And so I think really focusing on, figuring out how to channel that energy productively, but also especially engage the, community leaders can be something that we can do, like both two sides of the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. And unfortunately, we have run our time allotted for this section. Anyone who has more questions about this, are they free to reach out to you, Dan?
So I had a second PR. I apologize. I don't know where to find the agenda. Will we be able to cover that this meeting or next meeting?
Unfortunately, right now we do not have time, but if we get through our other items faster, we definitely can. If you want to give like a 1 minute, really quick summary, we have time.
I think going to the PR is the best way for that. You can contact me on Twitter at LittleDan. You can DM me or email me at littledan@igalia.com for more discussion, or otherwise I'll just leave it to the rest of the topics.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dan. And thanks for finding time. Feel free to stick on the call. I'm very interested in your input on the other stuff as well. So, and actually this ties, I think, really nicely into the next agenda item that we have. And Dan, this may fall into your interest as well. 10 minutes for this one. It's organize the next collaborator summit for Foundation, not just Node.js. And so part of the thought process here is, we have, as of the last Node.js board meeting, a $30,000 budget to organize a collaborator summit in Berlin just before JSConf EU. It would be happening the 2 days before the conference. The TC39 actually is a meeting the week afterwards in Berlin as well. So there's going to be a lot of people around. One of the things that we discussed about this collaborator summit is traditionally the collaborator summit has been mostly focused around Node.js, our various initiatives, what we're working on. But, since we do have, the timing is pretty, it's late May. It's around the time that, not only should the Foundation merge have happened, but likely, we're starting to figure out some of the edge cases of how we're doing things. It would make a lot of sense, at least in my own opinion, for us to be doing a broader vision for what we can be doing with the Collaborator Summit, as well as, offering some of this infrastructure to other projects who haven't gotten to do it before. So as I said, we have 10 minutes to discuss this. I don't want to put too much direction on it, so I'll let it go from here. Does anyone have particular thoughts on whether this is a good idea or a bad idea? Or another seed we could put there is what kind of things could we be doing that would be different than what we've been doing in the past?
I'll chime in, Jory here. We were really excited on the JSF side to think about what it would be like to be included in this event. And we have a couple of ideas that have been circulating. One is to do like an open source showcase featuring all of the projects that will be in the foundation, but also being open to other open source projects that may want to come as part of sort of that common spirit, and providing that time, depending on how many people show up, to either do like a half day or a full day showcase where the projects can network with one another and give short presentations on their project, either something they're working on, or maybe it's an introduction or whatever. I've had one project indicate that they would be interested in hosting like a workshop as well as part of this. And that's the kind of, these are the kinds of things that our community right now is thinking about, because, we have to bear in mind that it is not likely that any of these projects are necessarily going to be bringing in like 100 people for working group meetings, for example, as Node well can, but they appreciate the opportunity to network with each other and also to potentially meet new contributors. So. Excellent.
I mean, one thing that comes to mind as you're saying that, Jory, is, in the past, and this has fluctuated between collaborator summits, we've had like plenary sessions at the beginning that tend to be more almost like scheduled talks that we go through, and then following up with that, we then break out into different sessions. Some years we've done it more birds of a feather style, where people have chimed in with different stuff, and then alternative times we've actually had a fully baked schedule beforehand, and we're trying to find the balance that makes the most sense. But since we're going to be bringing a lot of new people in the room, perhaps the kind of open house thing that you're discussing would be a good way to kick things off. That perhaps we could do this kind of, I had called it in the past, I did something similar, called it an open source bazaar. And we could do this kind of thing where we set up all the projects, meet and greet, people can meet each other, then maybe have some scheduled sessions and turn that then into something that's, you know, more directed. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Michael Dawson has their hand up. Michael.
Yeah, I would caution two things. One, I think we need to make sure that we make additional space. You know, we had 2 tracks at the last one. So if we want to add in a whole new set of projects, we need to have a 3rd track so that it's an addition as opposed to a subtraction from the time that the Node project has. That was one of the comments we got out of the combined JS plus Node Interactive. I think people would have been fine if there was like an addition of a day and you know, so we didn't lose things. So I think we need to be careful on that front. The other thing is, you know, we have had feedback from a number of people that the sort of upfront presentations are less what they came from versus the working group sessions together. So I think we want to be a bit careful in scheduling content that's like single track that everybody is just presented to.
Well, I think this could work if, I understand that with a little bit extra budget, there might be ability to get another room. And, you know, it could be that we have a track running concurrently, which is more this bazaar style, you know, of networking and meeting and everything just happening in, you know, the next room. So if people are, you know, oh, I'm not
that's
interested.
exactly what I was suggesting.
Okay.
And so I'd like to suggest that, like, I think the bazaar style at the beginning kind of addresses the issues that people had with starting with a single track. I think that's probably a better way to do it as well, because then we can really focus in. Like, I know there was two of the sessions at the last Collaborator Summit, or the one in Berlin, that I was really interested in. Those were the ones I cared about at the very front. Being able to split that up into, you know, 10 or 20 is going to be helpful, and get people to be able to collaborate better. So I think that's a good idea. The one thing, you know, I think that we should definitely do 3 tracks instead of like adding an additional day for, you know, just other projects. I think that would be a poor decision, but I think adding a 3rd track would be best. That said, I do want to be cognizant of the effort it takes to do this. It is extremely non-trivial. So, you know, I just not necessarily saying no, but I want to make sure that we're aware that this a lot of effort does get put into this, and we would need to kind of have more people focus on doing this part, rather than, or, you know, add more people rather than you know, letting the people who already do it you know, take this additional work on.
A couple things that I would like to add, and I mean, this depends on what our goals are. The first is, I don't believe that we have the budget allocated to do an extra day this year, although that's something that we can make a goal for extra years, or alternatively, you know, if the JSF has budget to pitch in on this, that's something that we could do. But, you know, one thought that I did have, you know, we're going during JSConf.eu, and there's a whole festival event called What the Fest that's going on during that time. There's lots of different meetups that are going on and community events that get cross-promoted through JSConf.eu. And I'm sure that JSConf.eu would love to collaborate with us. They've been very great about doing these things in the past. So it is very possible that if we wanted to, if we could pick a venue that we could run an evening event out of for more of a broader community, open to the community event that could be cross-promoted, almost something more like a meetup. So, Jory, I guess depending on the vision of the JSF, do you think people were thinking about the kind of bazaar style as a meet and greet for themselves in the projects, or for a broader community?
So, I mean, I think the goals of our projects, at least those who have indicated that they really are interested in coming, is, you know, they want to get some visibility for their project. They want to meet community people. They want to have conversations, and they also want to have conversations that should be noted about the merger and about the programming. So I think in addition to this bazaar idea, they are also interested in having working sessions on the joint foundation programs that will still need to be fleshed out probably at that time. So pointing that out. So I think they're very open to it being a community-wide thing, especially though if their projects kind of get to be, you know, a featured project or something like that. And just to indicate that, hey, I'm part of the JS Foundation, I'm proud of that, and I'm here to talk to people.
Okay, great. So we're nearing the end of the time for this item. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. I've dropped in the chat a link to node.js/summit. That's where we generally do the planning for this. And Jory, I would say, you know, anyone from the JSF side who's interested in getting involved, please share that link. You know, I noticed that there's a pattern here where we have node.js/summit, node.js/bootstrap. And, you know, I hope that doesn't feel not inclusive for individuals who aren't part of Node.js. It's open to everyone. And I have a few, and, you know, maybe we should start exploring where we should be putting joint work. But we do need a name for that. We'll talk about that later. But, you know, one thing I definitely think we should explore, and just to clarify, although this can all change, traditionally, you know, the Collaborator Summit is not an open community event. Not to say it isn't open to anyone who wants to show up, but it's not that large. It tends to be mostly the collaborators who are there, and mostly a smaller group. I think traditionally around, you know, 40 to 50 people. So perhaps if we're thinking about trying to reach a wider collaborator audience, that's something that we could try to do in an evening event that we can make free and open to the community. We can either do that with space in partnership with JSConf.eu, or potentially, since we haven't spent any of the budget left, we could earmark $4,000 or $5,000 of the budget to do something like this and maybe partner. There's a number of great spaces in Berlin that might be interested in partnering on that if the space that we rent for the summit isn't great for that. How does that sound to you, Jory?
That sounds good. I mean, we definitely are on the Summit's repo and are really excited. And there's also, I think, a email thread with some events folks from the LF too. So we're interested in just moving this along and seeing what works for everybody. So sounds good.
I think there's immense value to Node to having a public side of the meetup as well. So it sounds like there's a two-pronged need here. One is meeting external collaborators who we want to get more involved, and the other is figuring out our internal stuff. So it's interesting to balance that with the budget we have allocated.
And by we, I assume you mean projects, not Node.
Everyone, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I'm not sure if it could be in scope, but I think it would be great to do standards outreach around this, and it could make sense both in the internal collaborative part and in the external part. There's sort of different kinds of presentations that you'd give. I don't know if there's space, but I would be interested in that if it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. We ran a session on standards at the last one in, I guess this was in Vancouver, and it was very well attended. To be honest, I think this is one of the great advantages to broadening the scope of our mission. We're going to bring in a lot more stakeholders. I think this is great. We've run through the allotted time for this agenda item. Does anyone have anything last minute to add to this, or are we good? Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Our last agenda item that we have now, which will run until the end of the meeting, is drafting initial governance for the Merged Foundation. That is a nice loaded agenda item. You'll notice a whole bunch of references in there, including a Google Slides doc that was prepared by Mike Dolan that outlines, you know, potential governance structure, an issue about what the C3 looks like, an issue about what the CPC looks like, an issue about what the top level council's shape and focus should be, as well as a reference to the proposal around the CPC charter. There's a lot of conversation that's gone around here, and there's also, or there should be, and I guess that didn't get in there, I'll add that right now, is there is a project board that we had outlining the responsibilities and requirements of different top level groups. I thought that had been in there. It does not appear to be, so I've added it again. Oh, it was in there, I just ignored it. Okay, thank you for letting me talk to myself. So coming back to it, there's a couple different things, and for those who are not in the last meeting, we went through this project board and we came up with a whole bunch of different requirements for the different groups. And the different groups that we've been discussing right now are the CPC, the Cross Project Council, and the C3, which is the Cross Community Council. We had initially gone through a couple different iterations in potential top-level governance for the foundation, and the one that we had kind of been moving forward with as an idea up until now was splitting the responsibilities between the CPC and the C3. And you can see in here, some of the ones for the CPC includes managing internal projects in the foundation, decide what projects can join the foundation, keeping the board up to date on the status of foundation projects. I'm not going to list them all right now for the sake of time. I'll drop in the chat the link for those following along on YouTube. It's github.com/node.js/bootstrap/projects/1. One of the conclusions and things that we needed to work through by the end of the last meeting was that it wasn't entirely clear that we actually needed a separate structure for both the CPC and the C3. The things that were different between the two seemed more like initiatives rather than core responsibilities. And it started to feel, at least to myself, that we were perhaps creating more bureaucracy and a separation of interest than we necessarily needed. Now, this is extremely important for us to figure out sooner than later, because we have 3 community board seats that we're talking about. And with 3 community board seats, initially we were earmarking one for the CPC and one for the C3. So if we only have one committee, then that's changing the allocation of board seats. This is also one of the things that will be central in our figuring out what the structure of our bylaws are. So I guess one of the things that I would like to start this with from a thought process is one of the big things that is blocking our ability to do the merge from a legal standpoint. And if any of the lawyers on the call want to jump in and let me know when I get this wrong, which I definitely will, please do. But we need to be able to draft bylaws first and foremost. And in order to draft the bylaws, we need to know what the top level committees are, and we need to know what the allocation of board seats will be. We also need to figure out what the role of the individual membership program would be in a larger foundation. These 3 things, as far as I know, are the main things that are blocking our ability to get the bylaws finished at the moment. Mike Dolan from the LF, was that an accurate representation, or was there anything that I missed?
No, it is important for us to be able to figure out the bylaws and the path forward on the board seats, because we do want to make sure those are in there. I think in the last call we did discuss a possibility that if we did merge the C3 into the overall CPC structure, and it seemed like a number of people were heading in that direction, that at that point then we could also just have the CPC more or less decide on the other 2 board seats on an annualized basis with the plan to the board or something to that effect. I think we had a very initial conversation. I'm not sure that went beyond that though. So
well, I did out of that I did take the action to update the CPC charter to try and reflect that direction.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. One thing that I'd like to add to that, there was a proposal. So when the community committee ended up getting a board seat, there was a bit of a shuffling of seats over in the Node.js Foundation as well. And for those not from the foundation, Node currently has 3 board seats on our board of directors. Initially, it was 1 board seat for the technical steering committee and 2 board seats for the individual membership. Individual membership seats were for 2 years and staggered. So each year a new person would join. As of right now, one of those individual membership seats has converted into a community committee seat, and the other seat is pending us figuring out the structure of what we're doing here today. When we were in the process of figuring out the ComCom seat, one thing that we had put together as a proposal was this idea of, perhaps we do not in the bylaws specify exactly what the seats are and make them something that top level committees can vote on and apply to the board on a yearly basis. So, one thing that has been suggested or requested about board seats in this process has been whether or not Node.js should have a board seat for themselves, whether or not there's this idea of a constellation project. And so one of the ideas that I wanted to plant with that was from a bylaw perspective. We don't necessarily need that encoded in the bylaws while still allowing for it to happen in practice. So if we, in the bylaws, allowed for a single board chair for the CPC and that the other 2 chairs would be presented by the CPC to the board to be approved, there's no reason why that first approval couldn't include a chair specifically for Node. But it would be more flexible long-term, allowing us to essentially give board seats to the people who require access to the board based on what's happening at the foundation at the time. Does anyone have any particular thoughts or concerns about that as a direction for the board seats?
I guess it's the mechanics of how does the CPC decide? It's basically a vote each year in terms of
I think that's a
where those two
CPC,
seats
right?
are.
Yeah, who's qualified to vote? I mean, we've got to obviously figure that part out.
Yeah, I like the added flexibility it brings without explicitly defining what a constellation project might be or what the process might be for board seat selection.
I guess
things to evolve in the future, which is nice.
Yeah, to Todd's question about like who gets to vote, I guess that would come down to our makeup and voting rights of the CPC to begin with. I guess this would be something that would be worked into the charter of the CPC and I guess into Michael Dawson's proposal. Does that seem reasonable to you, Michael?
Which I've already done.
Yeah.
So if you look at the PR that I mentioned earlier, I actually have rewritten it so that there's like voting and regular members. The voting members I identify, I believe it's each top level project gets to basically send 2 voting members. And then the CPC as a whole can elect 2 additional voting members from the regular members. And then I believe it was 2 members each from the I think it depends what we call them, like in terms of like there's the top level, and I think I also had some for the the incubators and so forth. Let me pull that up. Actually, I can tell you specifically.
And Michael, was there a reason for 2 voting members rather than 1 voting member?
The reason I chose 2 was it would allow projects some flexibility. So, for example, in Node, if we wanted then to say that the TSC elected 1 voting member and the community committee elected a voting member, it gave a little bit more flexibility than if you only have 1. So if you have multiple bodies and you want to have different bodies be able to elect voting members within a project, 2 versus 1 gave a bit more flexibility on that front.
Okay, that makes sense. And what was the difference between voting members and regular members?
So voting members, like it's described there, but the key difference is that voting members are the ones who make decisions on the like who gets admitted in terms of the project. So new projects getting added, anything to do with state change within a project, as well as if the group can't reach consensus, it's that voting group who makes the final decision. So it's worded as any of the project members from any members of the member projects can apply and become part of the CPC as a regular member. And the idea there is to be inclusive, try and get as many people involved in the work that's going on. The committees make people feel like they're actually part of the committee, and participate in the votes. Not in the votes, but participate in the consensus reaching process. So as long as there's no blocking objections, all the regular members participate in that and contribute to the decision. It's only for certain specific things like admission to the foundation and when consensus can't be reached that the voting members get to make the vote versus the regular members.
Mm-hmm. And just for those following along at home, reading from the current text, a regular member have the roles and responsibilities. Anyone who's been a member of one of the projects under the foundation for at least 3 months may request to become a regular member by opening a PR to add themselves to the list of regular members. Michael, would you be open to just making this more of a non-membership list thing where we just have open meetings that people can come to?
The reason that I specifically went to regular members and voting members was because we had a discussion around, we wanted to have a sense of you're actually part of the work. Otherwise, in the original charter, there were some comments around things like the CPC has responsibility for standards outreach, standards, coordinating with standards. And if you kind of have the CPC members and you say they're responsible for that, but then you have the only actual members being the smaller subset of voting members, the comments was, well, really we don't want just them responsible. We want a larger group of people responsible and involved. And, that's where we sort of headed towards the regular members and voting members, so that, everybody is part of the CPC, that larger group. It's just that there's a few things that, we need voting members for. And that's where I think it is a bit better than just saying, well, anybody can show up and participate. It's more like, no, you're part of the group and you're a member. It's just that there's a subset of things like admissions that we think we need to have, not just everybody, not everybody who's shown up and participated, but a subset that make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be explicit, I think that the need for voting members is definitely there, and I think Todd could maybe chime in. I think even just from like a legal standpoint, if that group is going to be making decisions, we need that. I'm just personally at this point not convinced that keeping a active member list for the non-voting members helps with anything. I think if anything, it might create extra friction to people getting involved. I want to use this meeting in particular as an example. Because we don't have any sort of member list, we just have requirements to join, which I think we've been pretty loose about. People have just been kind of showing up and being actively involved. I think had we had a member list and introduced that friction, we may have had less engagement.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think we, sorry.
I was just going to say, it sounds like whoever is like the CPC chair will just need to be, as part of their responsibilities, fairly diligent about making sure that for each project there is in the foundation, that they have, that they know who the 1 or 2 voting members of that project is.
Okay. I mean, it seems like we're maybe getting into the weeds. Oh, sorry, Michael, please go for it.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing. Like, this is not intended to say that the meetings can't still be open, and even, we don't have to say you need to be a regular member to come to the meetings and participate.
What is the value of a regular member then?
It's, I guess, in terms of stating the responsibilities and what we expect people to be doing. The regular members have shown an interest and I guess some level of commitment of actually, carrying out those responsibilities versus just people, anybody can show up, but that doesn't mean they're actually, they may show up and just listen as opposed to trying to help get things accomplished.
If it's open attendance, do we have any type of requirement that you're a project in the foundation to attend said meetings? Or is this literal open attendance, anybody and everybody welcome? And do we differentiate between those type of attendees and the members who attend from projects that are not voting members?
I guess that's something we haven't really discussed. Yeah, there was projects I've been part of have always, had invited guests and things like that, but generally the folks who participate in the meetings are people who are engaged in the project. I have seen where people have come in from the outside and been disruptive and weren't really engaged in the project and had discussions. I think we've all maybe experienced that. So,
yeah, and at the end of the day, we might be arguing semantics here. If there's not a functional difference between a regular member and somebody attending an open meeting, then I don't know if there is a detriment to having a special designation for just an attendee from a project.
Or flip side, if that's in the bylaws, that's easy to change if we find it ineffective. Maybe it's not the best use of our time right now.
Yeah.
But I guess
one difference might be that, if you were trying to carry out the consensus seeking process, it might be that, the regular members are the ones who could make objections versus the, other people who can participate, but, you don't need to go to the tie breaking to overcome their objections or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely seems like, I want to take a step back for a second though, because we got really, really deep into this, which is great. But it seems like, do we have any objections to maybe dropping the C3 from the governance structure right now? Because it seems like we've gotten really, really into the CPC. Yeah. So I'll just ask this to the group right now, and we probably should, have an open issue until next week to make sure we're on the same page. But does anyone object to us just having a single top-level committee for the foundation?
No objections.
No objection.
None here.
Not me.
Okay.
No objection.
Excellent. So I think we can move forward, assuming that that's the case for right now. And then, there's some people, stakeholders who, may feel differently that weren't able to be in the meeting today. So let's make sure that, we don't move forward with anything until next week. But, that seems like at least a good place for us to have a shared definition as we kind of dig into this. And then for the board seats, since it seemed like we were getting really deep into the process of like who the group would be that decides that, is there any concerns right now from a bylaws perspective of having the CPC make proposals to the board for the other two seats? Okay, I will take that silence as consent. Now, Michael, did you have that worked into your proposal right now around the board seats?
No, that's one thing that actually was in the README that we still needed to figure out the number and make up the board seats. The only thing it currently says is that there would be one for the chair, but I can add in some text that basically says there's 2 additional seats that the CPC will, basically just, the voting members will make a proposal to the board each year, and text around that goes along with that.
So I guess an addition to that, and just a question to the group as a whole, if we're going to be doing that, do you think that that's something that we should append into the general bylaw, the general charter PR that Michael has together, or do you think we should have a separate PR proposal specifically for this board seat bit?
I think there's a lot of language that we can safely land and not block progress on board seats as long as it's called out in the PR that lands the existing PR, that there's still work to be done in that section. Like I'd hate to see the entire document blocked on just this issue.
Okay.
Although it is a significant issue that will block final ratification of it.
Yeah, likely, so we had what we did the last time. So for my current one, Matteo said, hey, what about the board seats? We said, fine. And we updated the README to say one of the things before this can progress is the board seats.
Mm-hmm.
So we can probably do something similar where I'd still suggest we should land, my first PR because it doesn't include that bit and shouldn't be blocked by it. And then I can have an additional PR to that says, okay, and here's the text that goes around the board seat.
Okay, excellent. So I think with that being said, there's kind of 2 other things that we haven't gotten into yet. One is the role of the individual membership program and the new foundation. So Tracy's been leading a lot of the discussion around that, and I'm pretty sure Tracy will be joining us next week. Is there any concern with punting on the discussion around individual membership for right now? Okay, I guess just a little bit to leave people with to think about. The individual membership as it is right now in Node is an official thing that is in the bylaws of the foundation because it's, it is an individual membership program for the foundation as a whole. I think that moving forward, personally, I think it would make sense that individual projects may have some sort of individual participator or individual contributor, or maybe not individual contributor, but some sort of program that can be run specifically for the project. But I'm unsure what the role would be of an individual program for the foundation as a whole. Let's just make an agenda item to dig specifically into that in the next meeting. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Right, just want to clarify. So you're not sure if it makes sense for the overall foundation, like a merged foundation versus a specific project?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying, because this is from the summaries that we've had before, that the individual membership program as it exists has not been incredibly successful.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, there is a continuing effort in the community committee to overhaul individual membership. We've gotten pretty far. So I think when we do come to that discussion, bringing in a lot of that context is going to be useful. And, I think that work can honestly be adapted because we've done a lot around it, can be adapted to either be for the overall foundation or a kind of framework for project by project. Either one could work. That said, I personally think that having like the way it's set up is like cool. You pay whatever amount, like I think above $10. So it's self-selection in terms of how much you want to pay for membership. I think doing that 30 times if you wanted to be an individual member of every project probably doesn't scale out. So we'd either need to introduce like a higher class of you are a foundation member and you're a member of all of the individual membership projects, or centralize into the one. And I think centralizing into the one is probably more powerful because it brings a more diverse set of developers and backgrounds and interests into that group.
I'd probably agree with that stance pretty strongly. Like I think it's more likely to be successful as a unified program, and probably a good place to start the conversation next week is to review the latest proposal that just made its way through Node as is, and talk about how that specific program could translate or be adapted for a larger foundation, and just see if it fits in the new model. Yeah.
Excellent. So we have 5 minutes left. So let's kick off a discussion about the simplest thing that we need to figure out is a name. So I don't think that we're gonna figure this out in 3 minutes. That'd be great. But we've been calling it dollar foundation because we just have a variable. We don't know what it's going to be. Node.js was something that we chose to use for our last event, and we could use as a placeholder until we have a different name. My only concern with Node.js is it's not a valid URL, which makes for bad marketing. Has anyone had some time to think about names and have any ideas around names that might work?
Well, so just on the Node+JS, if we really do like it, you can always spell out plus as PLUS, Miles.
For what it's worth, I'm a hard -1 on Node+JS. It doesn't flow. It doesn't look particularly good. Even if you consider like node.js, like .js is an extension, plus is just like it doesn't feel as right.
What about the .js Foundation?
The .js?
No, that's a conference.
You can't use that.
Yeah, so I think that's all just screaming names for the next 2 minutes. Won't be the best use of time. But does anyone have an idea of or want to take the action item of maybe spinning up another call or a document or a process for helping to identify names, or an idea of how we can do it? One thing we can also consider, I don't know if we want to, but like we could hire a marketing firm, or we could try to do it ourselves. Does anyone have any thoughts around that?
Taking a stab at doing it ourselves will probably make us happier with the end result at the end of the day. Although if we get, a couple more weeks out and we still don't have a final result, you might want to.
Yeah, I guess my comment would be that the name of the holding foundation isn't as important as the individual projects that continue to have all the recognition, right? So it can be a lot of different things.
I'm personally a little concerned that the naming exercise will distract from what I think is the more important job of making sure that we have a system that's working for our projects and that the projects feel really engaged and really excited about. I had positive back around the interactive in the fall that from a cost and a just getting shit done perspective, it would be a bit more efficient to keep the branding of one of the organizations and just continue with that until we get things up and running. But I hear the timer saying that we're done, so.
So as Jory so eloquently put it, we are done. We are back again next week, which is the 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This was a super productive meeting. Big things to kind of chime in for towards next week is, those who have worked on the individual membership program, start thinking about how we'll present that and work on it next week. Maybe start an issue to discuss it. And then please take time to review Michael's PR around the CPC charter. That seems to be where the majority of the work we need to do right now is. So I'm going to stop the stream. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today.